Hello and welcome to my class on botanical art. I call it Botanical Delights. And as you can probably see behind me, I delight in botanical art. I've got a bit of a thing for flowers, leaves, trees, and of course other parts of biology, but particularly drawn to things that bloom. So you can see behind me there's a painting that I called Birthday Flowers. It was a gift on my birthday, funnily enough, and that was painted almost alla prima, nearly in one go, but basically with no drawing, just paint on canvas. Behind me, you can see one of my quick studies, which I do with acrylic and quite a thick brush, like this. So I have this is a size 6 neef with a stiff and quite a long bristle. So that, and also with the addition of watercolour pencil afterwards. So I do a very quick study wash, and then when it's dry, I draw into it. And I do that a lot with pen and wash studies too. Behind me here is another one of that study where I put the colour on first and then I draw in with ink pen, a gel pen, we call it a gel pen. Behind me for inspiration, there is a Margaret Preston. She's a well-known Australian artist who lived in between the wars. She was very popular. I also do realistic style of drawing. So that is a creeper leaf. Not sure what it's called. I just like them. This is a screen print. So I do silk screen printing. So I drew originally the eucalyptus leaves. I then made a silk screen, which I have used to print in white. And I've then painted in the background in gold acrylic, but the paper was toned, so it was a deep brown. So there you are, there's an example of some of my work. Now, I'm going to take you through a little bit of information that I find all my students enjoy. And I thought it might be useful for people out there who don't come to my classes face-to-face, or you may be able to come to Zoom classes that I run. But this is about the art of plants. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of an exploration of things basically that interest me in the world of botanical art. So I'm going to put on this is a little PowerPoint that I've devised. So this is Botanical Delights, the joys of illustrating nature, because it is joyful. And I think one of the things about botanical art is that it makes people happy, because it is something that sort of reminds you of spring, I guess. Now, botanical drawing, just to go back a step, has been an important scientific tool over the centuries. Before we had photography, obviously, it was the principal way of documenting plant types, apart from collecting actual specimens, which they did in great numbers. And you'll remember the story of Charles Darwin and his voyage on the Beagle and his collecting at the Galapagos Islands. And of course, Joseph Banks, who came to Australia, and he is one of the most well-known and earliest botanists to classify plants in Australia. And in fact, I have a Banksia plant right outside my door in my studio. Now, it's still very important that we have drawings, scientific drawings, because there's a limitation with photographs, and they don't always demonstrate the particular elements of a plant On the Royal Botanic Gardens website, this is in Sydney, you can see more about botanical illustration, and there's the website there. Now, this scientific botanical art, it may be a little tricky to see that because it's so detailed, but this is a drawing which has won, I believe, a medal from the Royal Horticultural Society in England. And it's done by a woman by the name of Sarah Jane Humphrey, and I have been to her class in Falmouth in Cornwall, which was fascinating. So as she says, it's invaluable to apply a concise, informed strategy from the beginning to the end of each artwork. And this is if you're going to do it scientifically. Now, I'm not about doing scientific work, although I do from time to time draw very detailed drawings. And I'll show you some of those. But I think it's really important, even if you're using a botanical art as a creative medium, or creative style, genre, is to get things right. So here are a few of my very illustrative drawings of various plants that I've found that are Australian plants in the area that I live. This was the red gold tree. This is the cedar tree from northern New South Wales. There are very few of them left now of any size, but Landcare is growing them again in some plants, and I've been shown them, and so I drew this. But really what I want you to illustrate here is getting to know the way the veins go in the leaves, the shape of the leaves, and the way the leaves attach to the stalk. So this is a pinnate leaf. Over here, there's a hoop pine. This is a Richmond birdwing vine, and I've actually collaged a couple of little butterflies. Sorry, Richmond butterfly birdwing vine is the actual name. And I've made a screen print of it. So I'm going to, at some point, turn that into something. I'm not sure what yet. And this is the bunya pine. So this is a very prickly pine, but it's a very important tree. It's a very tall tree, and it has very, very large nuts, but it's an important tree for Aboriginal people. And in the northern region up here in New South Wales, they do have festivals, celebrations around the nuts, and the nuts are edible. Now, this is an illustration of lichen on a stick. And so you can see how what you choose to draw on and what you choose to draw with, if you're not going for the absolutely clean cut drawing, can be important. So lichen on a stick is a very kind of fluffy thing. There are very few hard edges. There's a little one there. This was an old sort of decaying stick covered in lichen. So I wanted to try and capture that. So using a rough 300 GSM paper and charcoal helped to convey that for me. So just a little tip. Here's another one where I'm actually have drawn detail of this plant, whose name I'm sorry, I cannot remember. I'll look it up if somebody needs to know. You can send me a comment. But I have accurately drawn the leaf shape, the strong vein in the center of the leaf, and this is the it's about to flower. So this is the flower head or the bud, and it's an Australian native plant. Now, what I've done here is really, I've just made this into a decorative art piece. So that was part of it, but the rest of it was the fact that I wanted to put in just some elements that took me to the Rinpa style. I became very interested in Japanese design at one point, and Camus Akasaka's work. And so I was stealing a little from him in putting this design in gouache in the background and in gold acrylic to give it some shine. And now this is a detailed piece of Camus Akasaka, who was an artist who created a distinctive language for Japanese design in the modern age. He took elements from ancient times, 1600s, 1500, 1600 Japanese art and the 100 flowers style, and he brought it into a more modern age. And that has since been worked on by couturiers like in Australia, whose name I've forgotten at the moment. But anyway, it has certainly been developed. Now, this is another one of mine, Tread Lightly on the Planet. It's a Banksia. And another one inspired by Camus Akasaka. And it's a mixture you can see here of exact drawing, but with a simplified design. Now, I move between being fairly exact and being pretty loose. And probably from the work you see behind me, I am pretty loose there. So moving into a looser interpretation of the flora, but it still needs to have the elements. So, you know, this is a nasturtium flower. This is the leaf parts of a succulent. This is a nasturtium leaf, and so on. This is a rose bud, rose leaves, and there are elements here that have been drawn in on top of the washy colour that show the actual shape of the leaves. When I was in Provence on one of my French sojourns, I picked a bunch of petals of poppies and other wildflowers, and so this has got no drawing on it at all. It's all just done with brushwork. But you need to examine again the way the flower falls, the shape of the stalk, the flowers that have a multitude of little florets on the flower head, daisy and the centre of the daisy, and so on, the way the leaves sit. This is an oil painting, and I was wanting to capture the lorikeets, those lively, acrobatic, noisy birds, but also this tree, which actually comes from South Africa, and it's often called the Drunken Parrot tree because the nectar in the flowers is so attractive to the birds, but it does ferment over time, so they get fairly drunk and very chattery. But again, I'm just showing you here, you need to have that shape of the leaves so that there's a negative space there, but the leaves are accurately portrayed and the flowers come directly from the branches. And they have this multi-flowered head, if you like. The Persian carpet. Persian carpets. So you get Persian carpets in all sorts of countries, not just Persia, but they're commonly known as Persian carpets. And they are inspired by botanical, by botany. And so you get the highly decorative tree of life design. I'm not sure, I don't know that this one's actually based on tree of life, but this intense patterning and the beautiful colours, and they've been highly sought after for many years and often are very, very expensive. But the whole botanical art is probably the emotion behind it, I guess. It's a bit like the tree of life symbol, representing our personal development, uniqueness and individual beauty, just as the branches of a tree, or you could say a flower, strengthen and grow upwards to the sky. We too grow stronger, striving for greater knowledge, wisdom and new experiences as we move through life. Tiles, Islamic tiles, it features, botanical art features very prominently in Islamic art, and there is very, within religious Islamic art, there's very little in the way of human or animal representation because of the whole issue of idolatry. Botanical textiles are incredibly popular, and I wouldn't be surprised if you have some curtains in your house with flowers on them, or carpet, or other textiles, cushions. Cushion design is wonderful. I love these botanical textiles, and I've given you an Instagram here because these beautiful Australian natives in this particular fabric, but they do fabrics and wallpapers. Now, actually going back a minute, you can actually create your own designs on fabric or wallpaper using your designs. So there's a website for you there. Margaret Ollie is a famous Australian painter of still life. That genre is one of the most popular genres in art, I would imagine, and particularly with botanical elements. And it's often in an interior, although it may not be, may stand alone. It's highly decorative, and I imagine again that it's quite life-affirming, and it's so popular, that's probably why. There's the tradition of the Dutch and Spanish masters, highly detailed, richly coloured, extremely stylised, very popular. This is a painting by Gacha Kelly, who is an artist who was living up here in northern New South Wales, called Pomegranate Ashanti. And Lucy Cullerton, she's another Australian artist, lives in the southern areas of New South Wales. Again, just look at these blossoms, how she paints quite impasto, but look how delicate these blossoms are and how perfectly formed, and just look at the way she's observed the way the branches grow, and then no leaves at this point in the life of the blossom trees. Quite beautiful. And I'm just going to finish up with one of mine. This is Poinciana Bowl. And like many artists, I like to paint what's in season. This is an acrylic on canvas with a background of Payne's grey with a brass bowl. And I have a Poinciana tree in my garden, and they have these incredibly deep red blooms, very distinctive trees. So there we are, that is that. So now I've given you a little bit of an overview of botanical art, and what I might do now is actually do a little bit of a demonstration. So I'm going to put a page. This is not the most brilliant paper in the world, but it's quite good for this particular exercise. Right, and now I've remembered the name of the other couturier that I was talking about with the Japanese design. It's Akira Ishigawa, Japanese couturier in Australia. Very beautiful work he does. Now, here we are. Now I've got this arrangement. So this is an Australian orchids, native orchids, and these long strappy leaves, which are rather attractive. So I'm just going to use that as my subject, and so you might be getting a bit of the back of my head. I hope you'll still be able to hear okay. And I've got on my palette some magenta, white, cadmium yellow medium, Prussian blue, a quinacridone nickel azo gold, and some dioxazine violet. So I'm just going to get a very quick idea of this plant. It's got these beautiful purpley petals in the center, and there's another flower just down on the other side. So that's just going to give me my beginning. Mostly this flower is white, but of course white on white doesn't always go, so I'm making it a very pale blue, and I'll add in some more white to give you the idea that it is a white flower. And then I'm going to, at the end, I generally will bring in the background a bit so that you can actually get the idea of the petals coming forward. So here we go with another, I don't know if you can see this very well, but it is a very, very, very sort of pale blue. And I'm just trying to capture the fall of the petals. Okay, that's given me a bit of a starting point. Now I'm going to chuck in, because I do paint in a very kind of loose, chuck in sort of a way, some of these strappy leaves in the background. So it's starting to take shape. You've got a strappy leaf, a couple of blooms. Let's get another one in here. So when I paint, I generally have the brush loaded with 2 or 3 colours, not a lot of water. You see that that's starting to happen. Here we go again. I'll actually put in some of the stalks. Now there's a bit more yellow in that, so we're going to try and brighten that up a bit. So under this petal, and there's a slightly different shape to the leaves. See how that works? And then we've got just on the over to the side, we've got another very sharply pointed leaf, a sword shape. Right. Okay. Now we need a stalk for this other flower. So it's actually showing us its stalk a bit, and the green kind of goes into, not really as dark as that. I've probably made that a bit too dark, but we'll get away with it. This is art rather than botany. Although, as I said before, I think it's important that you try and keep the veracity of the shapes, so that, because look, our eyes actually fill in a lot of stuff that's not necessarily on the page. So I'm going to just pop in another leaf that's not in my actual setting, but I just think it would help. It just makes the composition work a bit better. And we can have another one here. Okay, so that is a rough. See there, I try and do these studies very quickly. They're not meant to be grand. And then there's a bit of yellow in the flower. So I'm just going to see if I can pop a bit of that in. And here. And then this flower is showing us its underside. And there's a lot more yellow just there. And there. So that's the beginning part. Now, as I said, I tend now to put in some drawing elements, and I have got some pencils. So I'll often use these watercolour pencils. Now, this might be a little bit wet, so it may not work as well as it will at another time. But I start to drawing the flower formation. Oops, just broke that one. See if this one works better. So you can see what I'm doing, I think. And of course, this will work a little better once that it's dry. And because I'm doing it for you all at the same time, I haven't dried it. But I mean, a bit of freedom in your painting works really well. So we have a flower here, and there's a bit of dark under there. You know, you can play with this. And here we can have the way that this stalk goes. You can play a bit with the leaf shape. You don't have to colour in between the lines. You see, you can make it quite interesting by just putting in some elements that don't actually match up with your painting. Now, with this one, you can see that I've put in a background here, and I can do that with this one too. But right at the moment, I want to sit with it because I think that it actually is working quite nicely just as a piece on its own. And in a little while, once it's dry, I will play with it some more and work it into a kind of a mixed media probably, so that it's more along the lines of that particular piece there or the one behind. But this is a starting point, and I just wanted to show you how I approach it. So I do hope that's been useful for you, and I intend to put more tutorials onto my YouTube and that people can subscribe to. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.